Out of doubt, out of dark to the day's rising. I came singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. To hope's end I rode and to heart's breaking. Now for wrath, now for ruin and a red nightfall. More than 5 centuries have passed since the day when the last king of Gondor accepted the challenge of the Nazgul Lord and set out for Minas Morgul. The house of Anarion has died out, and the last descendants of Isildur survive among the borderers to the north, where the cities and fortresses of the Arnor Empire once stood long ago. Meanwhile, power in the southern kingdom had fallen to the ruling administrators, and the land had long enjoyed relative peace and tranquility. It was a wary peace, however, for the Gondorians knew well that their ancient enemies were far from defeated. On the contrary, evil was creeping slowly but surely in the world, and deep beneath the misty mountains, Balrog, the demonic servant of Morgoth, awoke and drove the dwarves from their seat in Khazad-dûm, so that it came to be called Moria, or the Black Abyss. The Witch King of the governments in Minas Morgul and his master Sauron were secretly gaining strength and secretly breeding a new variety of orc, which later came to be called Uruk-hai. It was these new servants that the Dark Lord then unleashed upon the world, and such was the power of their attack that Gondor almost immediately lost the territory of Ithilien. The situation worsened and the armies of Minas Morgul also took the city of Osgiliath and destroyed its great bridge. The Gondorians eventually recovered and managed to push the enemy out of their territory. But it was clear that the era of vigilant peace was definitely over. Moreover, the orc attack was to be a prelude to something far worse. For in the days of Steward Cirion, a new enemy threatened the kingdom. The Eastern Balchoth clan. The northern border was poorly protected due to the constant threat of attacks from Minas Morgul. Moreover, the spies had thoroughly informed the ruling administrator of the danger of this invasion from the east, and Cirion knew he could not counter it. He sent messengers north to the valley of Anduin, where there were friendly tribes of lesser people, alongside whom the men of Gondor had fought the Easterners many times before. The 6 envoys carried the red arrow, a missile with black quills and a tip painted red, reminiscent of the orc's arrows and a symbol of mortal peril. But the journey was dangerous. Only a single messenger named Borondor successfully reached his destination and delivered the message to the steward of Cirion, King Eorl. Meanwhile, Gondor was preparing a desperate defense. The northern army marched out of strongholds such as the Isengard or Helm's Deep, which was not then, but of course, not yet called so. Warden Cirion personally took charge of it, while the southern army approached from the more densely populated areas as reinforcements. Meanwhile, the Balchoth tribe was crossing the Anduin River. Cirion tried to stop the Easterners from crossing, but it was too late. The northern army was repulsed and pushed into the highlands. At the same time, the Gondorians were attacked by a horde of orcs from the Misty Mountains, possibly sent by Sauron or one of his servants. Although the southern army eventually reached the battlefield, the chances of victory seemed slim. Cirion was trapped with the river at his back and his enemies pushing his troops into the deep waters of the Anduin. But then the horn sounded, thousands of horsemen arrived on the battlefield, for King Eorl the Young had heard Borondor's message, gathered his men and set out to aid Gondor. The rearguard of the Eastmen did not expect the attack and was scattered by the horsemen, freeing the Gondorian warriors from encirclement and thus deciding the entire battle on the fields of Celebrant. The resistance of Balchoth was broken and the lords of the west triumphed over the invaders. Eorl and Cirion parted after the battle, but the steward of Gondor invited the king to another meeting 3 months later near Mount Amon Amarth, where the first king Elendil was buried after the War of the Last Alliance. The two rulers then ascended the peak together, where Cirion gave Eorl and his people the entire province of Calenarden, which has since become better known by its new name, Rohan. At the same time, Eorl and Cirion recited an oath pledging their eternal friendship. They also pledged to contribute military aid to each other if the other kingdom was threatened. This oath remained in force for many centuries, and after the Battle of the Black Gate, the kings, Aragorn and Eomer renewed it again. Cirion also called Vala and even Iluvatar himself as witnesses, something that has not happened since the last alliance. The kingdom stood side by side for the next 5 centuries, during which time it endured battles with the Dunlendings, Umbar corsairs, orcs, and many other foes. The days, however, grew darker once more, and the evil that King Isildur had once failed to destroy once more claimed a voice. Sauron's power had returned. The Dark Lord began to rebuild his Tower of Barad-dûr. The land of Mordor was once again overrun by countless hosts of orcs. The nations of the south and east converged under the banner of the blazing eyelidless eye. And Gondor, the last of the realms descended from Numenor, became weaker than ever. There was only one hope left. Far to the north, he guarded the former lands of Arnor. A simple ranger, he grew up in Rivendell like generations of his ancestors. Few knew that this man was in fact a direct descendant of Isildur and also of Arvedui, the last Arnorian king whose claim to the throne had once been rejected by the proud nobility of Gondor. Many didn't even know his name and called him, the Walker. The dusk of the Third Age was approaching when Arathorn, the leader of the Borderers, gave birth to his first and only son, Aragorn. But the chieftain did not enjoy his offspring for long. When Aragorn was only 2 years old, Arathorn was killed by an orc arrow, so his wife Gilrian carried the little boy to the Rivendell. There he grew up in the court of Elrond, a half-elf of his distant kin. For protection, he was also given a false name, the first of many he would bear throughout his life. For they called him Estel, meaning hope. When Estel was 21 years old, Elrond finally revealed to him the truth of his noble origins and gave him the heritage of the House of Isildur, the shards of the Sword of Narsil as well as the Ring of Barahir. The young ranger often traveled with Elrond's sons Elladan and Elrohir, and when their sister Arwen returned from Lorien to visit their grandmother Galadriel, he fell in love with her. He also met the wizard Gandalf the Grey, whom he soon befriended. What's more, he began to travel this time under another false name, Thorongil, meaning eagle with a star. He first went to the court of King Thengel of Rohan in Edoras. This event is mentioned in the extended version of The Two Towers, where Thengel's son Theoden remembers meeting Aragorn in the days of his youth. However, it is uncertain whether King Theoden remembered Thorongil in the books, although it is possible he was about 10 years old at the time of Aragorn's arrival. From Rohan, Thorongil then proceeded to the court of Gondor, where he served the then-ruling steward Ecthelion. He advised him to trust Gandalf the Grey more than Saruman the White, who had administered Gondor's Tower of Orthanc for several centuries, even going to war against the Corsairs and burning a good portion of their fleet docked at Umbar, personally killing the harbor lord in the duel on the quay. But after Aragorn sailed back to Pelargir, he refused to return to Minas Tirith, where great celebrations awaited him. Instead, he headed east, and many of the people longed for him, but not young Denethor, who had begun to see a rival in the stranger from the north. Aragorn has also traveled south and even passed through the darkness of the mines of Moria, although from the other side than the later Fellowship. That was also why he did not know the password that opened the dwarven door. He watched over the Shire and protected the land of the hobbits from all evil that would seek to enter it. He was known there as the Walker. He also met Arwen again at Caras Galadhon in the middle of Lorien, and there they became engaged, much to Elrond's displeasure. Elrond was only willing to give his daughter to Aragorn on the condition that the heir of Isildur first regain the rule of Gondor and Arnor. Aragorn's mother Gilrian also opposed the marriage. Before the ranger could address the situation, however, the wizard Gandalf asked for his help in an important task. He wanted to capture Gollum and find out where the creature had gotten the magic ring, for he already suspected that it might be the lost jewel of the Dark Lord Sauron. The search eventually took many years, and Aragorn's mother died of old age while her son was away. Isildur's heir, however, eventually stumbled upon a fresh lead and finally caught Gollum in the dead marshes. He went with him to Lorien, where he sent a message to Gandalf and then made his way to the Dark Forest, leaving Gollum in the dungeons of Thranduil, king of the Forest Realm. After more than 15 years, it seemed that Aragorn would finally be granted a moment of peace. The war for the ring was just beginning. When the ranger learned that Gandalf was missing, he went in search of the Frodo the wizard had told him about beforehand. He stumbled upon him in the Bree and led the hobbit to the Rivendell where the Fellowship of the Ring was formed. With 8 companions by his side, he then set out on a journey before which he had the elven smith forge the fragments of Narsil again, resulting in the creation of Andúril, the Flame of the West. He warned Gandalf of the darkness of Moria, and after his fall, led the Fellowship to Lorien, where he received the green stone of Elisar from Galadriel, which will be important in our story. After the breakup of the Fellowship, he, Legolas and Gimli then pursued the Uruks that had kidnapped the hobbits, Merry and Pippin. Aragorn took part in the Battle of Helm's Deep, where he helped save Rohan from Saruman's schemes, and after interrogating the treacherous wizard, he regained the Isengard Palantir, the ancient heritage of his family. As its rightful owner, he was able to resist Sauron's terrifying will and appear before the Dark Lord to provoke him into a rash attack. He then took charge of the Rangers who, along with the sons of Elrond, set out to support Aragorn in his most difficult test, bringing him the banner with the white tree of Gondor that Arwen had made for him. Aragorn then made his way through the paths of the dead, and at the Stone of Erech summoned the perjurers who had once betrayed Isildur and would not help him against the Dark Lord. With the help of this army, he then destroyed the Corsair fleet and loaded the captured ships with warriors from the southern lands of Gondor. With them, he arrived at the decisive moment of the Battle of Pelennor Fields and saved Minas Tirith from collapse. He used his knowledge of healing to help heal Eowyn, Merry, and Faramir, who nearly died in battle, to give Frodo a chance to complete his quest and destroy the ring in the fires of Mount Doom as he marched with the armies of the West to the Black Gate. Sauron was provoked this time as well, and sent his hordes to attack, to finally destroy the last sprout of the house that had defied him so many times. House Elendil escaped the destruction of Númenor. He defied the power of the One Ring in the War of the Last Alliance and stopped the fall of Arnor. But the Dark Lord was certain that this time, victory would not escape him. In this darkest hour, however, Frodo, despite all the difficulties, came to the gullet of Orodruin, and through the pity that had once held Bilbo's hand, the ring was indeed destroyed in the fire from which it had once come. The men of the West triumphed, and Aragorn received the crown under the name of Elisar I. This he received from the stone given to him by Galadriel. He sat on the throne as the 26th king of Arnor and the 35th king of Gondor, fulfilling the condition of the Lord of Elrond and marrying his love Arwen. He retained Faramir as steward of Gondor and made him prince of Ithilien. With Eomer, he renewed Jarl's oath, expanded the boundaries of the Shire, and issued a ban on all high men entering the land of the hobbits, which he himself observed. He had Orthanc restored and planted a new seedling of the White Tree. He also settled a number of territorial disputes with the Eastmen and Haradwaith. Elisar's reign lasted a long 122 years, during which time the king had several daughters and also a son, Eldarion. It was he who succeeded his father on the throne, while Elisar breathed his last at the age of 210. The greatest of kings that Middle-earth had known for millennia was laid to rest alongside his old friends, hobbits, Merry and Pippin. His wife Arwen then made her way to Lorien, which had gone dark and empty after the destruction of the ring. On the hill where she and Aragorn were once engaged, her long life then ended. And with it, Our story.